Okay, guys, welcome back to the Metric Hub YouTube channel. And today we'll be focusing on the grade 8 term 3 work. We are still on the forms of ownership. We are still on the forms of ownership, discussing the forms of ownership. So this will be part 1 of the forms of ownership. And guys, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And also we have a join button if you want exclusive content. Without wasting any further time, let's get into it. So the first one that we're going to talk about, remember we talked about defining entrepreneurship. If you go back to the work on the YouTube channel, you see that we discussed defining entrepreneurship, right? So after we defined the entrepreneurship, we went on to discuss the forms of ownership. I'm sure you remember we discussed the forms of ownership in broadness, right? So now here we're just going to look at the characteristics of what a single or a type of ownership might include. So the first thing it might include is the ownership. We talk about the ownership. Now this refers to who owns the business. So according to the type of business that you own, according to the type of business, remember we talked about it, the sole traders, the partnerships, according to the type of business. Now you look at now actually who owns the business. So is it one member, two people, three? So that will depend on the type of business. As I said, the type of business. So let's look at that. So it showcases or it looks at who owns or how many people do what own the business according to the form of ownership. As it says here, it refers to who owns the business. It's either one person, it's a partnership, or shareholders. Remember your closed corporation where it's members who own the business. So these are the first characteristic of what? Of the forms of ownership. And then secondly, we move on to your liability. We move on to your liability, the debt of the business. Now, when we get to here, you need to understand these two definitions. So it says here, it tells us who is responsible for the what? For the debt. Who is responsible? So liability simply meaning the debt, right? Liability simply meaning the debt of the business. Who is responsible for the debts of the business? But here, as you can look here, we have two types of debts within the business or within the form of ownership. Firstly, you have your limited liability, right? Firstly, you have your what? Your limited liability. So what this means, if a debt is limited, it simply means that it is within the boundaries of the business, within the boundaries of the business. So let's say, for instance, remember our bakery, Dudu's Bakery. So let's say Dudu's Bakery. Now it owns, or it owes, it not owns, it owes 2 million to the what? To the bank. It owes the bank 2 million. So if this debt is limited, it means that the owners of Mdu's Bakery won't be liable. they won't be liable, meaning they won't be affected. They won't be affected by the debt. So do you understand what limited means? If a debt is limited, if a debt is limited, it means that the owners of the particular business won't be liable, they won't be affected by the debt. It means that the debt is only liable to the business. It's within the boundaries of the business. So that debt is owed by the business. It's owed by Mdu's Baker, not the owners. So you separate the two. You separate the two. You separate the debt of the business from the owners. All right. So what do? You separate the debt of the business from the owners. The owners of the business they won't be affected by the debt. This is when a debt or a liability is limited, right? When it is a limited liability. And then we get unlimited liability, which mostly happens in a sole trader or sole proprietor or a partnership. All right, so this will be our first one, a limited liability. All right, limited liability, where owners are not liable for the debt. And then the second one, we have unlimited. Unlimited what? Liability or debt. Unlimited liability. Now, this means that if the business owes 2 million, all right, and it happens that the business cannot pay this 2 million, the owners will be liable for the debt. Understood? So they don't have a separate entity between the business and the owners. It means that the business's debt equals to the owner's responsibility. The business's debt equals to the owner's responsibility. If the business cannot pay the debt, it means that the owner will have to then pay for the business. Now that's unlimited liability. So you need to understand the two, that you have limited, it's limited only to the business, but when it is unlimited, the debt can now go to the owner if the what? If the business can't pay for its own debt. All right. So that's the second characteristic. So that's the second characteristics, liability. We have limited and unlimited. And then thirdly, we move on to our capital. All right, we move on to our capital. So capital shows how much money can be raised to start or grow the business. So this will be your investments, your initial income, your seed money, right? So let's just put it here. Okay. So capital is simply your investments, your initial income, your seed money to do what? To start the business. Or in a case of like a deteriorating business, that's where you want to grow your business. You'll ask for investments or you ask for more initial income, depending on where your business is. But basically, capital is the money that you use to either start or grow the business. And then fourthly, we have management or control. So depending on what type of, again, we go to the forms of ownership, what type of business or ownership your business wants to handle. So who are you going to give control to? Who makes the decisions and who runs the business? So in a case of like a sole proprietor, the owner will obviously run the business because he's the only one. So that's where an entrepreneur will start a business and they will run it by themselves. But in a case of like a closed corporation where they're like members or a private company where you have shareholders, they will choose a certain person. In a case of like your CEOs or your managers, those will be the people who will eventually make decisions or run the business. So, management or control does not mean ownership, but it simply means who will make the day-to-day decisions about the business. All right. And then moving along, the fifth one we have taxation. How will your business be taxed? How will your business be taxed? Like it says, how the business is taxed. So as a person or as a sole trader, your business will be taxed according to how much money you make. So let's say for our business, Du's Bakery, again, we keep on using the same business so that you won't get confused. Du's Bakery. Now, in this instance, it's a sole proprietor. It means sole proprietor or sole trader, which is more easier to say, sole trader. And let's say it makes roughly about 20,000 per month. So it will be taxed according to the bracket that it makes. Probably, let's say the first bracket, which is, let's say 5% of your income. But now, if Mdu's Bakery was a big company, or rather a closed corporation or a private company, let's say Mdu's company now is a what? It's a private company with shareholders, and it makes roughly about uh, 2 million per month, right? Now the taxation will change according to the amount it makes. Now they will go to maybe the fifth bracket, which will now be 15% of the income. So you'll be taxed according to the business that you run as an owner, right? And then the sixth one, as we move along, we go to continuity. So continuity simply means, will the business continue in events of? All right. So that is basically or mostly stipulated in the contracts that you sign as partners or as members in the company. Now this will be stipulated in the what? The contracts. So in a case of a partnership, let's say Mdu's business is a partnership. Now as partners, let's say there are three members in a partnership, right? Let's just put it here, continuity. The carrying on of the business in case something happens, the carrying on of the business, right? The carrying on of the business. So let's say Mdu's Bakery is a three-person partnership, a three-person partnership. So in this case, if it happens that it's stipulated in the contract that if one member is deceased or chooses to leave the business, one member leaves the business, then there won't be any continuity. There won't be any continuity, meaning that the business will stop to operate if one member is deceased or decides to leave. So now it's stipulated again in the contract of whether the person, if one member decides to leave or is deceased, the business will. So, as it says here, whether the business continues to exist if the owner dies or leaves. So that will be also stipulated in the contract. All right. So let's move along again. Profit sharing. So remember, guys, these are the what? the characteristics of forms of ownership, depending on the type of ownership that you decided to choose for your business. So these are the things that you will follow, the features that will follow according to that business. So profit sharing, it says here how the profits are divided. It's either by the owner, shared among partners, or given to the shareholders, according again to the type of ownership of the. So profit sharing simply says like, how will you split the income, right? After you make money from the business, how will it be split? Will it be split according to the owner? So guys, don't confuse profit sharing with salaries and wages. Profit sharing is not salaries, right? These are payments to the workers or the people who work for the company. Profit sharing is then the money that is made after all the expenses of the business. All right. It will either be done after 6 months or after a year, depending on how the business structures profit sharing or their profit sharing. All right. So profit sharing says here how the profits are divided, right? Either by one owner, the shared among partners, or given to the shareholders. And then the last one we go to is legal entity. Legal entity. Remember, guys, we treat a business as a person, right? Even though it's a business, in the public or the societal eye, it will be treated a as a person. So a business is treated as a person. So let's say the company car gets into an accident, right? Company car gets into an accident. So what this simply means, what the legal entity simply means is that whether the business has its own legal entity, will it represent itself in the case of that accident? Because now it involves the business. The person or the business owners did not commit the accident, but the company did commit the accident. All right. So if it's a separate legal identity, if it's a separate legal identity, this one, right? You look at a legal entity that is separate. If it's a separate legal entity, it means that in the case of this accident, the owner won't be charged. The owner or owners of the business, they won't be charged with what? With the crime or the accident. They won't be charged. So the business will stand for itself in court in the case of a court emergency or things like that. But if it's not a separate legal entity, it means that the business's legal priorities are tied with the owner. So see here, guys, it's a separate legal entity. So it's separate from what? From the owners or the shareholders or the members of the company. But if it's not a separate legal entity, right? Not a separate legal entity. It means that whatever charges from the business will be put onto the owner. All right. So if the company car gets into an accident, the might owner might also be fined. Right? So in the case of a separate legal entity, the owner won't be charged or fined. But if it's not a separate legal entity, the owner might be charged or might be asked to pay for the company. All right? So that is the legal entity, depending whether it's separate or not separate. So guys, if you look back at the characteristics of the forms of ownership, we have number one, ownership. What type of ownership? The liability, whether it's limited or unlimited capital, how you choose to start up or how you choose to get your money to start up your company, management or control, who runs the day-to-day operations of the company, taxation, how will your business be taxed, continuity, whether your business will continue in terms of or in events that a person dies or leaves the company, Profit sharing, how the profits will be shared. Remember, profit sharing is not the same as salaries or wages. And then legal entity, if the business happens to go to court. So these are the characteristics of the forms of ownership. Guys, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the Metric Hub channel because we offer good and quality education. So as we move along to the first form of ownership, as we broaden it and as we explain it in full, the first form of ownership, which is a sole trader, or in very difficult terms, a sole proprietor. So if you see these two terms, they simply mean one and the same thing. So don't be confused by one term and think it's more difficult. It's one and the same thing. All right. So it says here, a sole trader or sole proprietor. Here's it. You see, here's the second. It's one and the same thing. These are synonyms, right? So it says here, a sole trader is a type of business that is owned and managed. Remember when you talk about the characteristics of forms of ownership, and we were talking about management and control. So in a sole trader, the owner will manage their own business. So it's a type of business that is owned and managed by one person. Sole meaning one. All right. Sole meaning one. Solo. Derived from the word solo. So a sole trader is a type of business that is owned and managed by one person who is also the only responsible person for the business. So this is in terms of legal entity, in terms of profit sharing, in terms of who actually is running or responsible for the business. So a sole trader is a type of business that is owned and managed by one person. All right. Who is also the one and only who is responsible for the business. So this person, like, let's go back. If you go back to so in terms of, okay, in terms of these characteristics, they will be the only one owning the business. They will be responsible for the liability, capital management, and so forth. We will discuss this further as we move along. So again, this person makes all the decisions and keeps all the profits and takes all the risks. Why? Because they are the only people or person in the business. All right. So that is a sole trader. So as we move along, the owner provides the money to start the business, right? The what? The capital. Remember we talked about the capital, which will be the initial income or investment. So it depends where this person gets. In some cases, the entrepreneur might have the money, or they might have saved up until this moment to start the business. Or in some cases, they'll go around asking for investments or donations in order to start the business. But initially, the owner, which is a sole proprietor or the sole trader, will start the business. So it's seen as if like he started on his own. In actual sense, yes, but depending on where he got the capital. So the owner provides the money to start the business, runs the day or the daily operations. Again, if we go back, remember we talked about here management and control, the day-to-day decisions or management. All right. And is personally responsible for any debts or losses the business makes, liability, as we talked about it. So in this instance, this will be an unlimited liability. So this business will be or will have unlimited liability. Because why? The owner, the owner is, so don't say owners, it's the owner is responsible. He's the only one responsible for these debts. So you can't put the matter onto the business because the owner is tied with the business, right? Again, as it says here, unlimited, you see, unlimited liability, which means if the business cannot pay its debts, the owner's personal belongings like house, like car, uh, so in this instance, personal belongings, okay, let's say personal belongings, belongings of the what of the owner might be what? Might be his car, his house, furniture, anything that is owned by the owner. Remember, this is an unlimited liability. All right. So these personal belongings can be taken in a case of a debt that is or cannot be paid by the business, as it says here. You look here, it says like their house or their car can be used to pay what is owed by what? By the business, right? And again, as we move along, it says here the sole traders are usually small businesses like spaza shops, hair salons, tech shops, or mechanics. Why? So, sole traders, let's just put it here. Sole traders are usually, okay, let's just do this quickly. Sole traders are usually, they are usually small businesses. Why? Small businesses. Because these are businesses run by one person. So in these instances, the owner is just managing small things to run. All right. In a small trader or a small proprietor, the owner is managing small operations. Now let's just put it like he's managing small operations. He's managing small operations. That is why he's running it by himself because it is easy for him managing small operations. And in some instances, a sole trader might not have enough, might not have enough capital to hire people, right? Not enough capital to hire people, to hire people. Why? Because initially, in most cases of a sole trader, right? In most cases of a sole trader, the sole trader is the one who is responsible for the capital. So the owner provides, like if you look at here, the owner provides the money to start the business. So in more cases, they won't have more or much enough money to do what? To hire or ask a partner to help them in the business. So they rather do it by themselves because of sometimes the lack of capital they might be having. So sole traders are usually small businesses like spaza shops, hair salons, tech shops, or mechanics because of these characteristics. So they are usually small businesses. They are run by one person managing small operations. So you can't just hire a big team to manage a small salon or a tech shop. You just need yourself to do all your bookings and your day-to-day operations in that case. All right. And then they are easy and cheap to start and are common in many communities. All right. Easy and cheap to start. All right. So this is the definition of what a sole trader or sole proprietor is. So let's move on to the characteristics of of a sole trader. So as we said there, ownership, one person. Why? Small operation. All right. Just say here, small operation. Just remember it like that. Why is it one person? because it's a small operation. Control also by that one person. Why? Small operation. The owner makes all the business decisions because it's a small business. Profits, all the profits go to the owner because he's the only one who owns the business, right? Only one who owns the business. And then we move on to the liability. Again, as you go back previously, it shows you here that they have unlimited liability. The owner is responsible for all the debts. So it has unlimited liability. All right. And then we move on to capital. Money is provided by the owner, whether he gets the owner from donations, investments, or from the family members. However, he is responsible for that money. All right. Money is provided by the owner and is limited to how much the owner can invest in the business again. So if the owner managed to accumulate 20,000, it means the business, the initial income of the business will be 20,000. If the owner uh, uh, accumulated 40,000, it means that 40,000 will be the initial income of the business. All right. And then moving on to legal status. This is not a separate legal entity. Remember, we talked about separate legal entity where the business's legal duties are not for or by the owners. So legal and separate and not separate. So you need to understand between the two, as I explained in the previous slides. So this, as a sole trader, you won't have a separate legal entity, meaning if your business goes into, or your business car finds itself in a court of law, as the owner of the business, you'll be able to, or you'll be viable to take that matter into your own hands. The business and the owners are in the same in the law. So whatever the business does, it will impact the owner in a case of a sole trader. All right. And then moving along to continuity. There's no continuity because there's only one person. So if this person happens to leave the business or it happens to be deceased, the business will eventually or technically close because there's only one person owning the business. So there is no continuity. The business ends if the owner dies or stops working. And then the last characteristic, which is taxation. The owner pays tax in their personal capacity, not as a company. Why? Because the owner and the business are not separate entities. The owner, okay, let's just do this. The owner and the business, the owner and the business are not, they are not separate entities. So as it says here, in the eyes of the law, the business and the owner are seen as one. You see here, the business and the owner are the same in the eyes of the law. The owner and the business are not separated. That's why that's why the business will be won't the business won't be taxed as a company, but rather as a personal taxation. So depending on how much the owner makes. So if you go back here, you see that profits, all the profits go to. So how much money the business makes, it's practically the owner's money. So he'll be taxed according to that much, right? So this is your key characteristics of a sole trader. All right, these are your key characteristics of a sole trader. And then as we move along, defining a partnership. So let's do this. This will be your first, as I said, this is your first form of ownership. First form of ownership. And then this will be your second form of ownership, partnership. A partnership, right? This is where maybe you and your acquaintance or your partner decide to venture into a business. Okay, so let's get into it. So it says here, a partnership is a form of business ownership where two or more people Okay, usually, so it depends on which country or where in the world you are. So usually in South Africa, there will be up to 20 people in a partnership. But if maybe you're living in France or maybe in Nigeria, there will be either more or less according to the laws of that country. So in South Africa, you can have up to 20 people in a what? In a partnership. So a partnership is a form of business ownership where two or more people join together to start and run a business. So there. So sole trader, it's one person. Here it's two or more people. All right. Two or more people to run, to start. So to start, maybe they'll eventually come or they will practically come with the what. So let's put here one, start. Let's say between you and your partners, you'll say the initial investment will be the initial investment will be 10,000. So each member or each partner will contribute the 10,000. So they'll contribute according to the initial investment. So there, you come together to start, you find the initial investment is 10,000, and then you run the business. From there, now you decide who will do what within the business. So that's where or how you run the business. So with the goal of making profit, so every other business, unless you're an NGO or an NPO, the initial goal is to make profit. All right. The initial goal is to make profit. And then as we move along, these people are called partners and they agree to share the responsibilities, risks, profits, and losses of the business. So when we go into further into the key characteristics of the partnership, you get to learn more about the responsibilities, get to learn more about the responsibilities, the risks, the profits, and the losses of the how does a partnership deal with these different types of characteristics, right? Yes. So moving along, according to entrepreneurship, a partnership is one where entrepreneurs can come together to combine their ideas, skills. Remember, when we defined entrepreneurship is when you come with, when you initiate and come with creative ideas to start a business. So in a partnership, you combine, you all come up with different ideas and then you come and combine them. And then all of you have skills and then the money, as we said, the initial investment and resources to start a business. So if maybe, let's say you already have like land to operate, so that will be good for the partnership or the business. All right. So partnership is basically coming together as entrepreneurs and combining all these ideas, skills, money, and resources to start up a business. All right. So each partner brings something valuable to the business, like money, knowledge, or labor, depending on what you can bring to the table, or depending what the business might need for your for your participation within the business. All right. Again, guys, as I say every time, every video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. All right. And then as we move along, our partnerships are usually started with a partnership agreement. So you come together. Okay, let's do this. Remember now, let's say you started it with your friends, but then you have to have what? A partnership agreement. So this is basically, uh, okay, this is basically a contract. Now, in this contract now, it will stipulate to it. Now, this contract, I just do like this, okay? Okay. Now, the contract will stipulate who does what, how much is contributed, uh, who manages and who is liable, maybe for debts or legalities. So in this contract, you come together with your partners and you form a partnership agreement. So it will depend on each company or each business started by the part. So you come together, sorry. So you'll come together and you will draw up a partnership agreement, which is like a contract. So it will state who does what, how much is contributed, who manages what, and who is liable for either the debt or the taxation or the legal matters in the business. So this agreement will state that. And it says that partnerships are usually started with a partnership agreement, which is a legal document that explains how the business will operate. As I said, this is what, this is how eventually your partnership will operate, all right? Which is a legal document which that explains how the business will operate, how profits and losses will be shared, and what happens if a partner leaves or dies. And this will be in the case of what? Continuity. Continuity. So, for instance, if there are 20 people in a business, it's not a very good idea to stop running the business if one partner leaves the business. So this partnership agreement will state that. So it will state the continuity of the business if such thing happens. All right. And then as we move along, just like sole traders, most partnerships do not have a separate legal entity. So it means, again, remember the separate legal entity and non-separate legal entity, right? Don't forget these two. You must not be confused. It's separate versus non-separate what? Legal entity. Like to put it in layman's terms, separate owner won't be responsible, right? For what? Legal matters of the business. Separate owner won't be responsible for the legal. Non-separate, non-separate owner owner or owners are responsible. All right, don't confuse the two. So just like sole traders, most partnerships do not have a separate legal entity, and the partners usually have unlimited liability. Again, so this is we're talking about legal entity. All right. Now let's talk about limited and unlimited liability. So it's more of the same thing. So okay, let me just do it on another separate. So you talk about limited versus unlimited liability, right? Limited versus unlimited liability. Okay. So when you talk about limited, we say the business debts are not carried to the owners. So the owners are not responsible. As we go back here, separate, limited. So separate will go with limited. All right. Let me just to not get here. Separate will go with limited. All right. So limited, the owners are not responsible for the business's debts. Let's just put it here. Liability meaning debts, right? But when it's unlimited, it means that unlimited, the business or businesses' debts are carried to the owner or owners, meaning that the owners are responsible. Owners are responsible for what? Responsible for the business's debts. All right? Because it's unlimited. It can go forever. It can go from the business to the owners. Owners are responsible. Responsible. Okay. Let's not get it. Responsible for the business's debts. All right? So that's the difference between limited and unlimited debt or liability. And here we talked about separate versus non-separate legal entity. Has to do with the law. This has to do with debts. All right. Again, so this means the business cannot pay its debts. The person may have to pay from their own personal money or property. All right. So this is rather the definition of what a partnership is. Right. Mhm. So guys, listen to understand and ask questions in the comment sections. All right. And then when we move along, we go to all right, the key characteristics of a partnership. So as we said here, the ownership owned by two or more people in South Africa, it might be up to 20 people, right? In SA, it might be up to 20 partners who own the business. The control, remember that partnership agreement, the contract, right? The contract. So partners make decisions together as agreed in the partnership agreement, right? The contract. And then profits shared among partners based on the what? The contract, the partnership agreement. And then the liability, usually unlimited liability, as we talked about unlimited liability, meaning that the owners, if the business can't pay for its debts, the owners will have to pay. So partners are personally responsible for the debts. And then the capital, it's combined contribution from all partners. Remember here we talked about the initial investment, the contribution, right? The contribution, the initial investment. So it will fall here. It will fall here at uh, capital. It will fall here at capital. So combined contribution from all partners, more capital than the sole provider. Why? Because there are more people. And then legal status, it's not a separate legal entity, not a separate. So whatever happens for the business, it might happen for the partners also. So partners and business are seen as the same in the law, same person, right? And then continuity, again, according to the contract, the partnership agreement, no continuity, different, but unless otherwise agreed in the what? In the partnership agreement. So in a case of like two members, there might not be no continuity. But again, if there are more members, remember, you can have up to 20 people, the partnership agreement will state whether it will have continuity or not. And then partners are taxed as individuals on their share of the profit. So the business is not taxed. The company or the business is not taxed as a what? As a company. It's not taxed as a company. So, yes, guys, those are the characteristics of what? Of the partnership. So follow more and like, share, and subscribe for more content as we will be doing more forms of ownership in the next coming videos. Thank you for watching.